Hello everyone and welcome back to the Devlog for Real Communism, my city builder game. I did get some work in this week, which I'll get to later, but I wanted to use this devlog as an opportunity to present you guys with the roadmap that I expect to have for Real Communism. So that's what I'm going to get into first. I'm going to break the roadmap down into 3 core stages. Stage 1 is completing all of the core development tasks that still need to be done. So this stage encompasses all of the core mechanics and components that still need to be implemented into the game if I want to maintain the core vision that I had when I originally came up with the game idea. And I know that there's some touching up that has to be done on some of the mechanics, but there's 3 things that really come to mind when I think of finishing core components for this game. Number 1 is finishing up with the children. The children are into the game currently, but there's still a pretty good amount of work that needs to be into them to complete them as a class, really. For example, I need to make sure that the children age properly when they turn 18. I also have to take into consideration as to whether or not the player has unlocked child labor, which allows some children to be able to work. And if they do have that capability, I have to make sure that those children can be assigned to each of the places where they could potentially be hired. Then I also have to confirm that if they are hired somewhere, that they actually go to the place of work as opposed to school. Speaking of school, school is another aspect that I still need to clean up with the children. Firstly, I have to make sure that they're going to school when they're supposed to be. And then I really have to put some thought into whether or not I want to add some sort of educated variable or component to kids that actually go to school and graduate or whatever. It adds an extra layer of depth to the child rearing phase of the game. But it's just whether or not it's worth it to actually implement that part or not. The second core component that I can think of off the top of my head is finishing up controller support. Controller support is at least mostly finished. I know there's at least one other UI that I have to make sure that I get compatible with it. I also have to go back with all of the building UIs and menus and such to make sure that the controller support will allow players to delete and rename buildings. It's a silly step that I kind of ignored when I was putting together controller support for the first time. Now I'm going to have to go back and change it. That's kind of on me, because it is going to be essential for the player to be able to delete and rename buildings. And then the third core component that I can think of is going to be a pretty big one, and it's something that I've ignored up until this point, and I'm starting to regret ignoring, is the ability for the player to be able to save the game. It's obviously a major and important component to the game, because this isn't a roguelike of any kind. Even in roguelike, you still have the ability to save progress and stuff like that in some way. And so because of that, I'm going to have to work on being able to save the game. I know that there's a lot of variables that are going to have to be remembered. I'm going to have the ability to rebuild the exact world from scratch and the state of it, and which forests have been cut down, which stone deposits have been taken, etc. And so I know that in particular is going to be a pretty big task. Once stage 1 is completed, we'll move on to stage 2. And stage 2 is categorized by playtesting, mostly. So the goal is going to be to just play the game as much as I can, pick out any bugs that I can find in that time period, make sure those bugs get fixed. In addition to that, we're going to be looking at balancing the game during that time period as well. So as I'm playtesting, I'll be keeping in mind how easy is the game, how easy is it to keep the citizens fed. Is it too easy to build buildings? Does the player end up having a lot of excess resources? Maybe not enough resources. Maybe the citizens starve to death during winter. All of that will be taken into consideration during this time period. I'll also be using this time to get footage to create a trailer, which that brings me to the second part of stage 2, which is going to be updating the store page, making sure the images reflect the game in its current state, and also taking the time to create a trailer and put it on the store page as well. Once all that's done, we'll move on to stage 3, which is essentially planning for launch. The first step of planning for this launch is to create a playable demo. We'll export a working build and set some limitations onto the demo itself, and we'll go ahead and release it onto the store page. And obviously, right after that, we'll immediately be looking to fix any bugs that do get reported during that time period. Once we get through that step, the next step really is full release time. The only question becomes, when do we actually release it? And that brings us to the timeline itself and a couple of key deadlines. There's only one more Steam Next Fest that's going to be happening this year, and that Steam Next Fest starts on October 14th. I've already registered for the Next Fest itself, but one of the key requirements for a Next Fest is a demo. And I believe that the demo has to be up for at least a week prior to the Steam Next Fest starting, which, if that's true, gives us a deadline of October 7th to have a playable demo ready. And then there's the less important deadline of the end of the year. In my mind, I've tried to set that deadline as I want to finish this game by the end of this year. But there's nothing from a marketing standpoint that's really forcing end of year as kind of the day. It's just a mental thing for me. And then at the end of the year and the start of the new year would come an additional Steam Fest happening probably sometime in February. And then at some point in March of 2025, there will be a City Builder and Colony Sim Fest that will be happening. So that leaves us with 3 potential dates to work around for marketing for the game. In an extremely hopeful timeline, we would have a demo ready by October 7th to be able to participate in the next fest that's coming up this October. If I'm able to keep up with that timeline, that would allow me plenty of time without feeling rushed or anything like that to be able to fix any bugs or errors that happen during this time period and still be able to release the game fully by the end of the year. Then we can use something like that Colony Sim City Builder Fest that's happening in March of 2025 to be able to just use it as additional marketing tools after the game's already been published. But in a more realistic sense, where I can envision bugs are going to happen in the meantime, it's probably going to take me a decent amount of time to playtest and make sure everything is nice and clean before releasing that demo. I'm hoping to release the demo no later than the end of this year. Then I can have it ready to participate in the first next fest of the new year sometime in February. Then perhaps we can release in early March and then actually participate in that City Builder and Colony Sim Fest that's happening later on in March as well as an additional marketing opportunity for the game once it's been released. Like I said though, we did get some work done this week. I went ahead and implemented the function on the children to turn them into adults once they turn the age of 18. And then I also started putting in the framework for what I'll need to be able to save the game. There's still a lot more to do in that particular category, and it's relatively boring stuff where I'm just saving variables and stuff, so it's not something really worthy of going over here in the video. If we are going to stick to the hopeful timeline, I'd really need to be done with Stage 1 midway through September, so I've only got a couple more weeks or so to finish up these several tasks that need to be done. Then I could potentially use the next couple of weeks to test everything out, balance it, make sure it's nice and solid, and then export a build with restrictions for the demo. If you would like to support the game, please wishlist it on Steam. You can find a link to that in the description. And if you want to keep up with the development progress of this game, you can subscribe to this channel. You can also follow me on X/Twitter at Hayden Marlowe_ or on TikTok at Marlowe Development. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.